Arzu Merali is a writer and researcher born and based in London, UK. She focuses on human rights, Islamic feminism, decoloniality, and the grammars of human dignity. She is one of the founders of the Islamic Human Rights Commission and formerly an editor of the online journal Palestine Internationalist. Please help me in welcoming Arzu.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. I should begin by saying I'm not in any way at all an Islamic scholar, so I will be just presenting some observations based on the work that our organisation has done for the last 22 years, as well as what has been an absolutely astounding and exceptional conference today. And I really thank the organisers for A, organising it, and B, asking me to be on a panel, which in the event that I don't think I really am suited to speak. And the questions as well have been absolutely spectacular. As you mentioned, I'm one of the founders of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, and my interest very much came out of the activism of a number of us as students, and a number of us as students here actually in Cambridge. And there's a lot of memories sitting here coming back to me about events and so on and so forth, but I won't digress there anymore. The older I get, the more this sort of conundrum faces me, and it's happening across my lifetime that we're seeing a kind of a squeezing of civil society space in this country. Okay, it's been mentioned earlier about the essentially, I mean, this is my phrase, but the Stasi state, my colleague's phrase actually, the kind of intrusion into particularly Muslim thought processes that constrain Muslims from giving their opinions in this country. And now this has been going on for a good, 15, 20 years, very overtly through the law, and I would argue that it had been sort of other processes of social engineering for about a decade or so before that as well. And what we find ourselves in is this sort of situation now, where we as Muslims, even in our sort of, and I guess I'm one of them who grew up as a Muslim, and my communities around me, falling into this way of practice or different forms of practice. That, we believe in revelation, we want to follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We have the example of Sirah to draw from. And so we are always negotiating without realizing it in our day-to-day actions and thought processes to do with salah or anything else, to do with both timelessness and temporality, to do with jurisprudential questions, to do with interpretation and so on and so forth. But we are not overly conscious of that. That's just what we do. And at the same time, there's this great dissonance between this idea of our Muslimness, of what that might mean, and our everyday lives. Now, that kind of very securitized state that I talked about has been very impactful on creating this dissonance. It's not the only cause, but I think it's been accelerated. And you as an upcoming generation, I think, from where I'm sitting, I'm asking you to reflect on this, and I'll expand a little bit further. This morning, particularly, the first presentation, I was very struck by a couple of things. One was this idea of the part and the whole, and that focus on the part can never reveal the whole. You can have it the other way around, but that part can be destructive and disruptive. And sitting where we are as activists or would-be activists, people in civil society organisations, that part that we are stuck with in what has also been discussed today, the modern world, and as a political construct of this modernity is the nation state. Okay. And as activists, we are so curtailed by it, either consciously or unconsciously, that we've come to an impasse, almost. Almost. We are believers and there's always hope. So I hope that some of the things I'm saying here will maybe open up some thought processes, or I'm sure actually those thought processes are opened up and much more even advanced than mine, but actually help us to give expression to thinking around this. There are some questions we need to ask ourselves, and really I would just defer. It would be better if I just defer to Imam's book, actually. It's superb, and it covers all of this in a much more scholarly and perfect fashion than I could ever hope to convey. But there are some very basic questions that sometimes we lose sight of and actually are very important for us at the very beginning of our processes. Number one, what is the problem that we are seeking to challenge? That seems like a silly question, but I'm somebody who's been working on Islamophobia for a long time. And I've got to be honest, looking back on some of it, I realised that I actually have also just lost sight of what it was that I was arguing about. What is the problem? Because Islamophobia became the thing without the context of the wider context of what it was that was the actual injustice that we were struggling and talking about. We can maybe open up a Q&A because we don't have, I want to keep these comments short. Likewise, and connected to that, what are we working for? And this goes back to the idea of transformation. This morning, this idea of Christendom and spirituality versus civilization versus the moment we're in now, which is modernity. I'll just focus on that idea of modernity. What is it that we're going to do with that? Because we are in this moment, and I think I disagree with too much of a distinction between diaspora and where there are Muslims or where there are non-Western situations. As much as we have pockets of resistance, as much as we have subcultures and of communities and even nation-state examples, we are all affected and maybe, this is a bit controversial, but infected by Westernization. Okay. What is it we're going to do with that? What is it that we're asking for? Now, I grew up and I was an activist sort of end of the 80s and the 90s, and in those days it was much easier to call for transformation of society, and it was much easier to say, I want an Islamic world, right? It's very scary to say that now. I don't blame anyone for not wanting to say it. The problem we face now is that we are so many years down the line of that fear that people don't even think about that anymore. Okay, what does that mean? Because we've internalized the idea that, even if it might be a good idea, look at the mess we've made of it, let's just park it and try and save ourselves. It's an understandable reaction. And I blame leadership of civil society and countries, etc., rather than individuals and individual activists. Okay, we have a right on the ground to be scared. We're in a scary situation. But at the same time, courage has to come from somewhere. Who are we talking to, and why? And this goes back to the central organizing point of the nation state and how it constrains us. We're already very institutionalized through school and university in terms of who to defer to, where power sits, how we speak, how we acknowledge. And somebody raised a question about decolonization and narratives of decolonization earlier, and that's something I'm very involved with. And whilst I appreciate the kind of critique that was mentioned earlier today, at the moment, notice the moment, the time we are in, there is a space here right now for that production of knowledge, for that ability to turn around and say, I want X, whatever that X is, and it's because I believe in revelation, it's because I'm following the Sunnah, or I am interpreting the Seerah, or the Prophet ﷺ, or whatever, right? It's a moment. It's a difficult moment still, but it's there. That doesn't mean we don't make representations to the government, doesn't mean we ignore them or we ignore institutions. But it's about what we understand about them. They have physical power, they have temporal power. At the end of the day, as civilized, quote unquote, as our liberal democracies seem, they are governments because they have control over arms. And as we have seen with the securitization of Muslims, but now we are increasingly seeing in the violent policing of dissent be well beyond Muslim communities now. Kind of rapidly that's happened, maybe in the last 10 years or so. It is ultimately about the ability to have force more than the force of the idea, because as soon as it's come under a little bit of pressure, we see this kind of more aggressive face of elites, of power, of governance, of governing in the name of the liberal democratic nation. Nation is important, state. I wanted to segue here into where the nation state comes from, but there's a lot of work, you can find it of Professor Imam and many others, Boaventura, De Sousa Santos, etc., about the genesis of that being very much at the end, the conquest of Granada and the fall of the Iberian Peninsula, and this change in focus of political organisation into being about governance of one state, one nation, this kind of perversion of unity, actually. So rather than the multiplex we were hearing about earlier, we have a unity of unanimity, which is not just about me wearing a nationalist hat, it goes on to justify extreme genocide and murder. I know I've got to wrap on. Muslims at the moment, we're sitting in this kind of miasma. Either we are a civil society organisation, so I hold my own organisation as part of this, okay? And it's one that I've managed as well, so I'm guilty of it. Having this kind of very realist perspective, okay, we can't change this, it's just getting worse, we've just got to do X. Or we don't even see anymore what the problem is. We have so internalized the idea of Muslims as this weird anomaly of modernity that we ourselves are trying to fit ourselves into that paradigm. And that picks up on some of the things that we talked about off the panel, but are in Sheikh's book, in Imam's book, about allyship, about coalitions, and about the values that we adopt, because we are obviously still very involved. If we're not asking for transformation from an Islamic paradigm, we're still talking about having a better world, largely. Okay, there's another segue I can have, which we'll carve in Q&A about where we just wear a Muslim hat for the sake of power. We are going to have to resolve that very quickly. One last point, and we'll wrap it up here. Who are we working with, wrapped up in that idea of allyship and coalition? Imam has already explained, so I won't repeat what he said, but I would say there's a step before even that, and that is us working with other Muslims. Okay? Because we're really bad at that. Really, really bad. It doesn't mean we have to wait for the ideal united ummah, but we tend to become very quickly institutionalized, often on ethnicity or faith or other kind of very restraining factors, and then we seek either coalitions and allyship with people who are non-Muslim. It's not bad, for all the reasons I've already said, but to the exclusion of other Muslims who we may differ from on many issues, but quite frankly still have got a lot more in common with than the other people we are in allyship, right? And we have to realise that we have internalized that nation state. We've become our own little United Nations with our own little movements. I can elaborate, I think I'll leave it here. But these are the kind of four dilemmas, and we can maybe explore, if you want to listen to me, but I think you should rather listen to Imam, how to maybe move that forward, because we are stuck.
Thank you, Arzu.